Greetings, I'm Professor Hobo, and welcome to another HOBOTECH product review. Today we have one of the more premium 12-volt refrigerators on the market. This is the ICECO model JP40 12-volt compressor fridge, and this is one of the more premium refrigerators on the market because it sports a Danfoss German-built compressor with a 5-year warranty. Now, does that make it any better? Is this thing even any good at all? Let's find out. So what do you get in the box? You get the AC power cable, which allows you to plug it into shore or wall power. And you get the 12-volt plug, which allows you to plug it into your cigarette lighter, portable power stations such as a Jackery or a Blue Eddy. And this side goes directly in the refrigerator. So unlike other refrigerators, this has 2 cables and 2 inputs on it. You also get the manual, which we'll briefly go over in a moment, and you get a bunch of hardware. So what kind of hardware am I talking about? I'm talking about these handles. These handles do not come pre-installed. You do have to install them yourself, and I'll show you that. First thing I do is pull these little clips out, exposing these screw holes. So let's check out this very shiny yet beat up manual, because I've had this in the back of my side-by-side for quite a while. So this just shows you how to install the handles here on this page. And it does show you the specifications for all the series. So they have a JP30, JP40, JP50. The JP40 is what we're reviewing today. This is the one, it's like the mid-size one. Zoom in here on the dimensions. This is a 42 quart, 40 liter. It weighs 37.5 pounds. It's 17.5 by 23 by 14. And it runs on DC 12 volt, 24 volt. And of course, these pages are now stuck together. No, I haven't been doing any extracurricular activity. What's a little different is I've never really seen a manual mention what kind of cables you should use to run. It basically tells you what gauge cable and what length if you want to successfully run this in a vehicle. And like most other compressor fridges, this has a low, medium, and high setting, and there are the voltages. The cutout voltage on low is 9.6, and on high it's 11.1. And this refrigerator actually has fault codes in case you run into one of them. That's how you troubleshoot it. And as I mentioned before, this comes with a 5-year warranty. That's all she wrote. So let's review some of the features of the ICECO. First is this very nice lid. It's heavy and solid. It does not move. Now what you're hearing and seeing is the inside rack that's moving. And what else is interesting is, yeah, that's not a mistake. This actually has a blue light in it, which that's a little bit different. And of course it has the separator, so you can separate this into 2 compartments. This basket comes out and it goes pretty far down. Now on the very bottom, I'll show you, it actually has dimples down there for some kind of containers. You can see way down in there, it looks like that's for some kind of 2-liter bottles or something. Maybe you guys can tell me what they would put indents down there for. And then you have the dairy or unrefrigerated compartment, which is fairly deep. It's not as deep as the BOUGERV. And there you have the schematic and any statistics that you might be interested in. Now I do want to mention, in case you notice, this thing's kind of dirty and it's got scratches on it, and there's actually, you know, there's all kinds of stuff stuck to this. It's dirty, okay? The reason why it's so dirty is because I had this thing outside for 2 months in Tucson in the back of my side-by-side, and that's where we used it. I left it back there in 0-degree freezer mode for 2 months, and it ran like a champ, never had an overheating problem with it, it never shut off, it ran perfectly fine. The only downside is that it did have a hard time keeping up in the 105, 110 degree heat. Unlike the iCooler, which is also made by ICECO, this doesn't have as thick of insulation. This refrigerator is actually much lighter weight than the ICECO iCooler. And the iCooler is actually a larger refrigerator with thicker insulation, but it does have the cheaper compressor in it. At least the Indiegogo model did. This refrigerator is much lighter, much easier to pick up than the other one, but it comes at a cost of not as thick of insulation. Now the lid on this is actually very solid. You can hear it's not rattling at all. It does have a nice rubber seal around the outside, and the handles themselves are quite beefy. The ICECO does have this nice digital display, and you can turn it from max to eco mode by pressing on the little gear button here. You'll see the LED lights Switch back and forth between the green and the red. So that's the current temperature of the refrigerator because I had it shut off all day. And you just set it by changing the plus or minus. Very simple. And while it's blinking, it's showing you what it's set at. Then it'll stop blinking and it goes back to the internal temperature of the refrigerator. See, if you hold both plus and minus at the same time, it switches to Celsius. The JP40 in Eco mode is actually one of the quietest refrigerators I've heard to date. You can barely hear the thing running. So let's go ahead and measure the actual decibels to give you guys a relative perspective as to how loud it is. Now the fan is on this side of the refrigerator, so we're going to use the loudest side of the refrigerator to measure this test. There's really no sound at all coming out of the other side. There we go. As you can see, we're 1 meter away, or 100 centimeters. I'm going to stop talking and you can see how loud the refrigerator is in Eco mode. It's literally 22, 23 decibels. It is whisper quiet. Let's go ahead and turn up the compressor to maximum and see if it gets any louder. We have our Jackery test bed showing 51 watts, so the compressor is running at maximum. As you can see, it hits maybe 25, 26 decibels at most, so a couple decibels louder for max mode. And here are the inputs in the back. You have your wall outlet, goes right into here. You have your cigarette lighter, goes right into here. You have a 15 amp fuse, and you have your 3 setting switch, low, medium, and high. Another thing that comes in the box is this giant bag. Basically, it's a case that you can put around your refrigerator for extra insulation, extra protection. Let's go ahead and put it on. It's very easy to get the refrigerator in here. With or without the handles, it actually does have these little Velcros. If you do have the handles installed, like I do right now, you'll need to undo the Velcro on both sides before you get the refrigerator in here. Let's pick her up. Zip her in. And it does zip all the way around the lid, so it actually does hold the lid closed and shut. You can't accidentally open the lid. That's a good and a bad feature. Now the bag, of course, does have this clear section, allows you to press the buttons and see the temperature. And of course, the professor took the JP40 into his secret laboratory and performed various experiments on it. So what we're gonna do, this has been sitting downstairs for the last month, turned off. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on, and we're gonna measure how much power it uses to go from room temperature, which right now is around 76 degrees, to get down to 32 degrees. We're gonna measure how much power, how much time, and then we're gonna go ahead and reduce that down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're gonna see how much extra time and extra power it takes. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start the refrigerator. This is gonna be DC power, so it's gonna calculate how much DC power it takes to turn on the fridge and get it to 32 degrees. And we'll now go ahead and start the timer, and we're gonna see how long it takes to get to 32. Starting temperature is 77 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, we just hit 30 degrees. It just said 32, then I hit the camera and it said 30. 43 minutes. It took 2.5 amp hours, 32 watt hours. So not that much power at all to get it down to refrigeration level. And now we're gonna go ahead and kick it down to 0 degrees and see how long it takes to get down to 0. And we'll go ahead and restart the clock. It took 1 hour, 43 minutes total for it to go from room temperature, mid 70 degrees, down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Get some confirmation there that it is at 0 degrees. 5.4 amp hours, 71 watt hours. So pretty good performance. 1 hour, 43 minutes is actually very close to the results we got from the BOUGERV refrigerator, which I just reviewed recently. That does not have the Danfoss 5-year warranted compressor that's made in Germany, like this one does. You kind of expected German compressor, it's gonna be faster. Not really in this case. So now that the fridge is down to 0, We're gonna fill it with ice and other foodstuffs that's from our deep freezer, stick it in here, fill it up at least 2/3 of the way. We're gonna let it run for 12 hours and see how much power it uses. Now, I typically run these tests for 24 hours. However, I wanna get this video out sooner. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run all the tests at 12 hours, then just double the numbers. It doesn't really make any difference if I go 24 hours or 12 hours because the temperature remains relatively steady in here. I do keep the windows open pretty much all the time. We're just gonna roll with a 12-hour cycle and double it. So we'll come back tomorrow and see what the results are. Take a look inside there. We got some frozen ground beef. Lots of these frozen ice packs. These all come from our deep freezer, which runs well below 0. So these are nice and cold. I want you to take note of 2 things. One, we're switching to eco mode. We're gonna run this in eco mode overnight, and it's set to 0 degrees, which is deep freezer temperature. Number 2, we're gonna run this off the BOUGERV AC50S with regulated 12 volt. I figure it's a good test for it. It's fully charged, as you can see. And we're just gonna get a generic idea as to how much power from a 500 watt-hour power station gets consumed. Again, note this is a fully DC test. We're running from DC output on the BOUGERV to DC input on the fridge. We're back, it's 12 hours later. This has been running overnight on eco mode at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's see how much power it consumed. So here we have the 12-hour results. 16.75 amp hours, 211 watt hours. Since we're doubling the numbers here, we're gonna have about 34 amp hours, around 420 watt hours for a 24-hour run. So 420 watt hours to run this in freezer mode at 0 degrees Fahrenheit for 24 hours is actually pretty good. I remember running this same test on other freezers and they usually fared worse than this. So this actually has some pretty good insulation, and maybe it helps quite a bit is that it does have that Danfoss compressor, which is supposed to be very efficient. I kicked the compressor back on and you can see that on eco mode, it's only pulling 30 watts. It does pull about 40, 45 watts when the compressor first starts, but it seems like once it ramps down, it holds about 30 watts, which is, that's actually very little power. And so it's been able to maintain that 0 degrees overnight, even at this low rate. And you can see on the BOUGERV AC50S, it's pulling about 35 watts from the DC port. And you can see overnight, it only used 2 bars of battery for freezer mode. So we're gonna go ahead and keep using this for the next test. For our next test, we're gonna go ahead and pull all the freezer food out, put it back in the deep freezer, and then we're gonna replace the frozen food with refrigerated food, and then do the same test for 12 hours, come back and see what kind of energy it used. You know that old saying, 3rd time's a charm? Well, this is the 3rd time I've tried to perform this test. Hopefully it'll go well. First time I set the wrong temperature on the refrigerator, didn't realize it until it was too late. Second time I forgot I had this bag that came with it. If they include it with the package, I should include it with my testing. So here we are, 3rd time. Now this time I actually have the refrigerator set to the correct temperature and everything inside has caught up to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. I accidentally set it to 40. Everything in here got warmed up and it took pretty much all day for me to catch everything back up again. So I'm gonna show you what we're doing. I do have the bag on here right now, it's all zipped up. So I have about 20 beverages in here. I didn't quite fill it all the way that I taught, but it's mostly filled up. And I just put this in here from the other section, so it's not reading 32 degrees, but it is actually quite cold in here. So I have several cans of soda, some beer, iced tea, water, basically what you'd probably fill up for a weekend adventure. I have the temperature set to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And it is on eco mode. You can see the little green light right there. That means it's going to conserve power. Let's go ahead and put it back in its cryo chamber. And yes, this bag is filthy. I tried my best to scrub it. It was outside for about 2 months. And in case I didn't mention it already, I had this refrigerator now for about 3 months. I used it for 2 months in deep freeze mode in the back of my side-by-side in the scorching heat in Tucson. And I left it at its lowest setting and it kept everything frozen here just fine. In fact, it worked so well that it exploded a gallon of aloe vera inside, fruit punch flavored. And now I think the inside of this for all eternity is going to smell like fruit punch every time you open it. So yeah, it works quite well. It's well broken in. I've played many hours on this compressor already. Here we go, starting voltage 13.54. Everything else, as you can see, is zeroed out. And we're going to continue our testing with the Blue Yeti AC50. You can see we're still at 60%. Now I did unplug the refrigerator from the Blue Yeti while I was screwing up the test. So it's exactly where it was before on the rated charge. I unplugged it from here and I just plugged it into the wall. So there we go. Let's come back in 12 hours and see what the results are. See how much power this thing used in 12 hours with the cover on at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Greetings, we're back. It is the next day and we're about to find out how much power the JP40 used in a 12-hour period. Now remember, you got to double these numbers for 24 hours. Now it was a cool night. It went down into the 60s and it is currently 77 degrees. So it is a very mild day. The refrigerator was set on 32 degrees on eco mode. Let's check out and see what the temperature is inside and how much power we used. Now remember, we're using this bag. It doesn't really have insulation. It doesn't, I mean, it's not very thick. It doesn't have any kind of foil on the inside. So it's a very basic thin bag. You can see even towards the top of the fridge, it's 33 degrees. So pretty good. So the amount of power we drew, 5.8 amp hours, 75 watt hours. That's amazing. Now remember, this was being drawn from the Blue Yeti AC50S. We're actually down 2 more bars. So we have to make a conclusion here of one of 2 things, or actually one of 3 things. One, that the test results aren't accurate, which is entirely possible. Number 2, that this thin insulating bag did an amazing job at keeping this cooler so cool inside that it only used 150 watt hours in a 24-hour period. Now, for an example to compare this to, the ICECO iCooler, their other cooler, has more insulation and a cheap Chinese compressor, and it consumed about 240, 250 watt hours in a 24-hour period, but this was also in 100-degree heat outdoors, where this was in 60 to 70 degree temperatures indoors, even though I keep the windows and everything in here open, no air conditioning, no heating, so that the outside temperature is sort of the inside temperature. So that goes to show you, if you're camping in normal conditions and 70-something degree weather, and you set this to 32 degrees, you can actually run this thing on very little power. 150 watt hours for 24 hours is amazingly low. Now, this also has the German-built Danfoss compressor with the 5-year warranty. Maybe that efficiency has something to do with the compressor as well. So maybe it's a combination of temperature, the extra insulating bag, and the better compressor. Now, I'm not going to be able to verify the results of either one of those. Like, all we can do is guess at this point, because I got to get this video out. I could keep doing tests for the next weeks and months, and maybe I'll do a recap on this and do a follow-up later down the line. Maybe I'll do some tests in hotter weather, although fall's coming now, it's probably not gonna get that much hotter. So there's the results. Now those are some very impressive numbers for both the amount of power it takes to freeze and stay frozen, and the amount of power it takes to hold 32 degrees for a 24-hour period. This is essentially the most efficient 12-volt refrigerator I've ever had my hands on, including the Dometic I have installed in the van. Now, that may be because there is a German Danfoss compressor inside, which makes it more efficient, runs quieter. It doesn't seem to cool any faster than the cheaper compressor fridges, but, you know, hour and 45 minutes seems to be about normal to go from room temperature to 0 for just about all models I've ever seen. And that doesn't matter if you have it plugged in the shore power 12 volt, it all pretty much works the same. Now, if I was going to personally buy one of these for myself, I probably would go for the JP50, the larger model, because for me to have one of these things running, I'd rather have the biggest refrigerator I can get to stuff with things. And that's just me. The JP40, I think, is a nice mid-range size. It's perfectly fine. This will fit very easily between the seats of a van, for those of you who think that's important. The JP30 is a smaller model than this. It obviously isn't going to hold as much. It's still probably going to consume around the same amount of power. That's the thing. The 30, 40, and 50 series are all going to use the same compressor. They're all going to use about the same power. They all have about the same insulation. Yeah, it might take a couple of extra watt hours on the largest version compared to the smallest version, but the differences are going to be pretty minuscule. So what do I like about the ICECO? Well, gee, it's pretty clear to me what I like about it. That efficiency of that Danfoss compressor is just really hard to beat. That's very low power consumption. This thing's very quiet. Nice, strong, solid lid. It comes with the bag. The interface is very simple. It's kind of hard to accidentally hit the buttons. The BOUGERV fridge is kind of cool with the touch screen, but it's also a little bit difficult to use sometimes. You know, you have to press really hard, or you can't wear gloves in certain situations. This is just the straight old buttons that make that clicky sound when you press on them, so it's gonna work for years and years to come. What I don't like about it, probably that weird blue light in there. I'm not sure why it's not a white light and they put a blue light in there instead. I also would have liked if the little dairy compartment was bigger, but really it's kind of hard to find anything wrong with this. The minor exception being when I tried to run it in freezer mode in Tucson in 105, 110 degree weather outside, it did stick around 7 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit. I had a hard time during 110 degrees to keep it at 0. And I did keep it in the shade, but you gotta remember, this is outdoors in very hot weather. It's probably not what you're typically gonna use it. You're probably not gonna have this outside in temperatures that high. And even if you do, 7 degrees is you're still freezing your ice cream solid. You're still freezing pretty much everything solid. Now, I had no problems indoors keeping this thing at 0 degrees, no problem at all. Stuffed full of food, it went right down to 0. It stayed there overnight, no problems. So I wouldn't call this an efficiency problem. It probably just has to do with they tried to make this really lightweight, and it is. Compared to other refrigerators, this is very lightweight. That's not saying anything bad at all. This is gonna work for 99% of anything that anybody watching this is gonna use it for. And the way I see it, the efficiency more than makes up for any of its downsides. Now, if you're interested in the ICECO JP40, or the 30, or the 50, or the iCooler, or any ICECO model, there is a code in a description that's gonna get you 12% off of everything on the ICECO site. This is only valid on the ICECO website. It's not valid for Amazon purchases. Now, I asked them for an Amazon code. I may get one by the time this video airs. If I do, that code will also be down in the description below. So one link's gonna take you to the ICECO website where you can actually use my code to get 12% off. Then the other link below that is gonna take you to the Amazon page for just the JP40 in case you wanna get it on Amazon. Amazon's gonna be more expensive plus tax, but I know some of you prefer to buy on Amazon. Hey, thanks for watching. If you learned something today, don't forget to give me a thumbs up below. And if you're not a subscriber already, you know what to do. That's it for now. Till next time.
Odin commands you to like and subscribe, and clean my litter box.
And now I can finally have some dang iced tea because I put all my iced tea in here. I've been waiting all day for this. I'm a thirsty hobo. I'll probably save this for dinner.
RV Golf Guy, Z Foxfire, Jack Smith.